Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, one of the founding lies in the mass migratory narrative that has plagued the Western world for more than 50 years was that mass migration from cultures vastly different from ours will benefit us in all kinds of ways, not only curry, but also financially. Many of us have been able to see and understand intuitively that this was not correct. However, hard numbers, facts, if you will, was always quite hard to find, as the mainstream media and others did not want you to see them. They did what they could to hide and obfuscate the truth. Here today to shatter the lie and provide light in the darkness is Dr. Simo Grönroos and researcher Samuli Salminen from the Finnish think tank Suomen Perusta, who have studied and published their findings on the true costs for the Finnish people due to mass migration that has affected Finland. So a warm welcome to you, gentlemen. I will now give the floor to my esteemed colleague from the Finns party, MEP Sebastian Tynkkynen, for a more detailed presentation of our two distinguished guests.
Thank you, Charlie. Actually, let me introduce the guy who's sitting next to me, because you seem to be even more efficient than we Finnish people are. So this guy over here is Charlie Weimers, MEP from Swedish Democrats from Sweden, a really great friend of mine and very active member of this parliament. Dear colleagues, esteemed guests, my name is Sebastian Tynkkynen. I'm also MEP, but from Finland, from the Finns party, and a warm welcome to this Migration Policy Group meeting also from my side. Europe is experiencing a rapid demographic change occurring at a pace rarely seen in history. Understanding how migration affects not only to labour markets, but also to public finances, political behavior, public opinion and taxpayers is essential for responsible policymaking. In fact, the financial burden is largely absorbed by public budgets and ultimately by citizens. I would like to now shift our focus to our esteemed guests, who will reveal you today quite shocking numbers, I would say. Dr. Simo Grönroos, this bald guy over here, also my really great friend. He's the executive director of the Finnish political think tank Suomen Perusta, and also the third vice chair of the Finns party, the same party that I belong to. And the Finns party is also the deputy prime minister party in Finland. So this guy is using a lot of power also. Simo is also involved in local politics, and he previously served as the Secretary General of the party, so he brings both academic depth and policy experience to the analysis of migration. Joining him is Samuli Salminen, an immigration researcher at Suomen Perusta. Mr. Salminen has conducted extensive quantitative research in academia, and his work on immigration is unique in scope. It is based on detailed administrative data and rigorous statistical analysis. Together, they will present research that contributes clarity and empirical depth to a debate that urgently needed. Thank you again for joining us today, gentlemen. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind words, Sebastian and Charlie. And first of all, I would like to thank you for organizing this event, because this subject is very important for Finland and for every European country. So my name is Simo Grönroos, and I'm executive director of Suomen Perusta Foundation. And me and my colleague Samuli Salminen, we are here to present what our think tank has made research on immigration, and especially about what is the fiscal impact of migration on Finnish economy and other European countries' economies. Suomen Perusta is a Finnish political think tank and research institute closely affiliated with the Finns party. We publish books, research, reports and analysis on a wide range of topics related to Finnish politics, including economy, euro currency, environmental policy, media, education, so-called woke ideology, and even issues such as hunting policy. However, the most important issue we focus is, of course, the immigration. In my presentation, I will introduce some of our key findings on immigration, such as the impacts of mass immigration on European societies and who promotes mass immigration to Europe and why. After that, my colleague Samuli Salminen will present our studies on the economic impact of immigration on Finnish public finances and how our research compare with the other European studies. As in much of Europe, immigration to Finland has reached all-time high in recent years. Immigration to Finland now amounts to around 50,000 migrants per year. In 2024, the number of people with foreign background increased by 52,000 people, while the native population declined by 20,000 people. You can understand that the scale of migration in a country with a population of around 5.7 million is extremely high. We have tried to inform the public by publishing graphics on the topic and even placing advertisement in newspapers like this you see in the screen. There has been a lot of debate what kind of words you can use about the immigrant situation, where the rise of immigrant background population is so fast that the local population is becoming a minority area by area. Mass media and our political opponents try to hush this discussion and say that you cannot use the words like population replacement or great replacement and say those are like conspiracy theories. Like you see on the screen, that's one of the newspaper ad we put on the paper, and we just put text, what word would you use to describe this course of events? And you see plus 52,000 people with foreign background in 1 year and minus 20,000 people Finnish background in 1 year. So the population changement is very fast in Finland nowadays. We have also tried to inform the public about the gravity of the situation by publishing our own population clock, which estimates the growth of the immigrant population in real time. It is similar to the so-called debt clocks used in many countries to illustrate the rapid growth of the public debt, but instead of showing debt, it shows how fast the number of migrants is increasing nationwide and in specific cities. Nowadays, already around 12% of Finland's population has immigrant background. That means over 600,000 people. The growth has been very rapid. The population with a migrant background has doubled over the past 10 years and is on track to double again over the next 10 years. In Helsinki region, the amount of immigrant background people is already about 25% of the population. In Helsinki itself, the figure is around 20%, while in surrounding cities it is higher, about 25% in Espoo next to Helsinki and about 30% in Vantaa, also a big city next to Helsinki. So the figures are very high and rising very fast. We have published also a couple of good databases where we try to show people the amount of migration, how much the immigrant population is rising in different parts of Europe, and what kind of social economic impacts that has in a local level. We have published this kind of database called Lähiöluvut. It's in English neighborhood numbers. So we have a map of the Helsinki area, the city of Helsinki, the city of Espoo and city of Vantaa divided to neighborhoods. And you can click every neighborhood there, and you can find a lot of statistics, how many people there are from different immigrant back groups, how much different immigrant groups pay taxes, how much they use subsidies, what is their employment level, and so on. So we have very good stats on the local level and even neighborhood level if we look at the big cities near Helsinki. We have also published another database called Kuntaluvut. It would be English like municipal numbers. So in Finland there is 300 communities. So you can click every Finnish community and see a vast number of different kind of data about how much in different communities there are different immigrant groups, what is their employment level, how much they pay taxes and how much they get subsidies and so on. So we have a lot of data published on immigration in a local situation. And of course, that's good, for example, in local politics, the local councillors in the city council can use in every part of Finland or municipal numbers database, and the neighborhood numbers database is good for our local politicians in Helsinki area to demonstrate the situation happening in local level. So, why is the mass immigration problem to Europe? Of course, we all know that there is a lot of reasons why we must fight against the mass immigration. First of all, immigration is costly for taxpayers because migrants on average pay less in taxes than they consume in public services. Our researcher Samuli Salminen will focus in his presentation on the research conducted on this issue in Finland and other European countries. Immigration affects society in many ways, and we have analyzed these effects in our publications for years. Rising crime and even terrorism are consequences of mass migration. In Finland, we have a good official data on crime that shows, for example, that in sexual crimes, migrants from Africa and Middle East are 10 to almost 20 times more likely to be perpetrators than the native population. Street robberies and gang criminality are also strongly linked to migrant populations. Multiculturalism is often described in official speeches as a strength and something positive, but the reality is very different. It weakens people's sense of belonging to the same society. The American social scientist Robert Putnam has conducted extensive research on social capital, including how multiculturalism affects it. His studies clearly show that the more multicultural a neighborhood is, the less trust people have in authorities, the less trust they have on other people, and less likely they are to volunteer for community projects or donate to charity. Putnam's data also shows that greater multiculturalism is associated with fewer close friends, lower level of happiness, and even more time spent watching television. Migration also brings cultural, ethnic, and religious conflicts to Europe. The most multicultural societies are often the most unstable. Civil wars and unrests in the Middle East are frequent caused by conflicts between Sunni and Shia Muslims, Kurds and Turks, or Jews and Palestinians living in the same societies. If multiculturalism does not work in the Middle East, how can we avoid the same problem if we bring these populations to Europe through mass migration? Migration and multiculturalism also create value conflicts. For example, when Islam and Western culture, between Islam and Western culture over issues such as the role of religion in society or women's rights. Last but not least, immigration levels are so high that native populations are becoming minorities in their own countries. This is already visible, for example, in cities like Brussels and London, as well as in many Swedish cities. The British think tank Prosperity Institute recently published a demographic projection by Matt Goodwin, estimating that native Britons will become a minority in Britain by the 2060s. In the big picture, Europeans are heading towards the same fates as the Native Americans. We know the consequences, so the question is, why is this still happening? Why the borders are open? It is happening because although mass migration is a disaster for the average European taxpayer, it can be a good business for certain special interest groups. In short, big business and left-wing fundamentalists have found common ground in promoting mass migrations. Large corporations and their lobbying organizations support open borders because they want cheap labor and new consumers. The so-called immigration industry promotes mass migration because integration organizations benefit from having more people to serve, and schools and universities want more pupils and students through migrations, which means more funding. On the left, there are also honest but naive reasons for supporting open borders, based on the belief that Europeans have a moral duty to share their wealth with all the humanity. But there is also a more selfish motive. Migrants tend to vote for left-wing parties. Big corporations' enthusiasm for mass migration is illustrated well in a recent column from Helsingin Uutiset magazine, where the CEO of the Helsinki Region Chamber of Commerce praised population growth driven by immigration. I quote, "A growing population means a larger customer base. This especially benefits retail, the restaurant and the tourism sector, construction, as well as companies providing wellness and care services. New demand will also emerge for digital services and solutions that make everyday life easier. Population growth strengthens the availability of labor. Net immigration brings skilled workers to various sectors, which is likely to ease labor shortages, for example, in technology, care and service industries. A multicultural workforce can also increase companies' innovativeness, language skills and ability to operate in international markets." So, corporations gain more customers and cheap labor, while the ordinary taxpayer pays the bill. And what about the left? Suomen Perusta has conducted a poll on voting behavior among immigrants in Finland. The result was that nearly 70% of the immigrants support left-wing parties. Nearly 50% support the Social Democrats alone, and when you add to that number the people who vote for Leftist Alliance and Greens, the number rises to 70% about. Yeah, and we can also see about our Gallup poll that the further migrant comes from culturally, the more likely he is to vote for the left. So the biggest numbers for left-wing party voters are immigrants among Africa and Asia, and lowest one among immigrants from Estonia and Western countries. We have also conducted polls on Finnish public opinion regarding immigration, and our findings show that 57% of the Finns would prefer to hire Finnish nurses rather than foreign workers, even if it would cost more. 48% believe that immigrants' children should not be taught their native language at school. And 79% of Finns think that the Christmas traditions belong in schools. We have also done an opinion poll on what Finns think about humanitarian immigration, and this is very interesting. 46% of Finns would stop humanitarian immigration completely and instead provide aid to refugee camps. 41% opposed and 13% had no opinion. So among those who said their opinion, majority of the Finns said, yes, we should stop completely humanitarian immigration and instead give money to the refugee camps and help there, what would be the only reasonable thing to do. These results show that the Finns are quite critical of migration and multiculturalism and want to protect Finnish culture. And the Finns are not alone. 2 years ago, a German French TV channel Arte conducted a poll on migration in every European Union member state, asking people whether their country takes in too many migrants. And in every single European country, the majority answered yes, too many migrants. So Europeans want to stop mass migration, and it is crucial that the democracy is allowed to function on this issue as well.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks again, Sebastian and Charlie, for the kind invitation. My name is Samuli Salminen, and I've been researching the fiscal impacts of immigration in Finland for the past 10 years. And what does this fiscal effect mean in practice? Well, it means what's the effect on the local taxpayer. And if you lived in a country such as Sweden or Finland, you probably heard from the mainstream media day after day that migration is benefiting us, the local taxpayer. But my presentation is about what happens if we look at the numbers that we have on immigration, the actual numbers, not any imaginary numbers. I will speak about our research, but to make it more credible, I will first refer to well-known other European studies, and I will show that the results from Finland are pretty much identical to these well-known academic and governmental studies. So there are very well-known studies from Denmark and from the Netherlands, and they've gained much of traction in even in the mainstream media in the past few years. And our results are very much like them. And let's see what are then the summary and conclusions from these studies. Okay, like I said, during the past couple of years, these studies from Denmark and from the Netherlands have gained quite a lot of attention, even in the mainstream media. So, for example, a couple of years ago, in the German media news outlets, even the biggest newspapers wrote that studies confirm the high cost of today's migration and offer a solution. Let's see what the solution could be in the end. And here is another headline: unrestricted migration destroys the welfare state. And this is based on actual data on immigration. And even The Economist, which is pretty much pro-immigration, never mind if the immigration is high-skilled or low-skilled, they are pretty much pro-immigration towards all kind of immigration. Even they conceded that it doesn't look great. Okay, they are saying that it's complicated, but when we look at this Danish data, we see pretty clearly that it's not really complicated, that the immigrants coming, especially from the Middle East and Northern Africa, they are a significant burden to the taxpayer. And even if we look at the non-Western immigrants as total, if we look at their cost during their whole life cycle in Denmark, they present a net negative burden for the taxpayer. So I was speaking about these two well-known and quite widely published studies. So the first one is from the Danish Ministry of Finances, and the second one is an academic study from the Netherlands, and it even gained a lot of attention in Finland last year. It was conducted by the Dutch professor Van de Beek. And what makes these two studies very important in this context? Well, firstly, they are based on high quality registry data that we have in many European countries, especially in the Nordic countries, as well in the Netherlands, and probably in many other countries as well. So the numbers are not imagined or assumed. Nobody is, in this case, assuming that the immigrants are doing well or that they have similar employment rates as the native population, but these studies actually look at the real numbers. And the second very important point is that they don't treat immigration as one whole total, but they distinguish between different immigrant groups and compare the results to those of the native population in order to see if the immigrants really fare as well economically as the native population. And when we do this kind of separation, then we can guide our immigration policies if we like and decide also according to these fiscal results. And just shortly, how these effects are estimated. Well, in principle, it's pretty straightforward. First of all, you have fiscal revenues from all kinds of people, whether they are natives or immigrants. So people pay taxes, or maybe, okay, not all the people are paying taxes, especially if we look at the immigrants. But on the other hand, they also cause some fiscal expenditures. And when we subtract these expenditures from the revenues, we get a net fiscal effect for public finances. And it might sound a bit abstract, but behind public finances, there are taxpayers. So if the immigrants present a burden for the public finances of a country, basically this burden needs to be taken care of the native population. So basically you need to raise taxes or take more public debt or cut maybe some public services like schooling or public health care. Okay, so what are the main results from the Danish and Dutch studies? The Danish study considers only 1 year, the net effect on the taxpayer during 1 year. And this Dutch paper looks at the whole life cycle, so meaning looking the whole period from the migrant moving into the country until he or she moves away or dies in the end. So what's the net effect collected or accumulated during his or her whole lifetime? So the methodology is a bit different in these two studies, and of course they are from different countries, but the results are remarkably similar. So the net fiscal effects are positive mainly for immigrants from other Western countries. So basically, it has been a total lie that the mainstream media has been proposing for many years. Not all kind of immigration benefits the local taxpayer. It's a very selective group. Actually, they are only those immigrants who come directly into high-paying jobs. And unfortunately, for example, in Finland and Sweden, the case is not like that. They are not coming to high-wage jobs. And on the other hand, these low productivity immigrants, meaning they have either low wages or they are not employed at all, present a net fiscal burden that needs to be covered by the native taxpayers. So here is just a graph that presents results from both of these studies, and there is like a very high correlation between the results from the Danish and Dutch studies. So those points there on the right-hand side, basically they are those origin countries that benefit the local taxpayers, and it consists mainly of migrants from the other Western countries. And basically the culturally further away you go from Europe, the more these immigrants also cost for the local taxpayer. So the most expensive immigrants come from the Middle East and North Africa. And in general, immigrants coming outside of Europe are a net burden for the local taxpayer. So here is a very informative graph from the Dutch study. So the origin countries that are in blue color or cyan, they are basically these origin countries from which the immigrants benefit the Dutch taxpayer. And those origin countries that are in red or in orange color, they present a burden for the Dutch taxpayer. And the reddest countries there in the eastern parts of Africa and Middle East, one immigrant on average from these countries cost the Dutch taxpayer several hundreds of thousands of euros during their lifetime. So one immigrant costs several hundreds of thousands of euros. So now I presented these pretty well-known Dutch and Danish studies, and now we can come to our own studies, which were actually published before these Danish and Dutch studies. So we were kind of pioneers in this field. So we have both kind of results. So we have similar results to the Danish studies. So when we look at the yearly situation, and then we have also these so-called life cycle fiscal effects when we look at the whole time the immigrants spend in the country. So first, let's look at the results in comparison with the Danish study by Danish Ministry of Finances. So this following graph presents the difference between the immigrant populations and the native population. So the zero level is the level of the local native population for the public finances. So in order for the immigrant to be as beneficial as the native person for the public finances, they should be at the zero level. So all the results that go below zero, they mean that there is a burden basically for the local taxpayer. So if we look at the methodology, just a few words, our study was conducted in a similar manner to these Dutch and Danish studies. So like I told in the beginning, we have a very vast array of data in Finland on every kind of people. And we did a big work to collect them. And these are the results. And as you can see, we published these results like 7 or 8 years before the Danish Ministry of Finances did it. But the results are remarkably identical. So if we look at the immigrants coming from the other Western countries, the fiscal effects are pretty much the same as for the local people. So they basically fare as well as the native Danes and Finns when they move into these countries. But when we look at the immigrants coming from the Middle East and North Africa, one person basically represents on average a net burden of minus 20,000 euros for the Danish and Finnish taxpayers. So this is totally against what we've heard during the past decades coming out from the mainstream media. And all of these results are based on very reliable registry data. And when we look at the non-Western immigrants as a whole, their burden is somewhere in between. So in Denmark, it's approximately like minus 12,000 euros per non-Western migrant per year. So can immigrants replace the native population as taxpayers? the answer is clear based on these results, no. Okay, this has been one of the main points that pro-immigration people and media has given during the past many years. But there is basically no doubt about these immigrants coming from the Middle East and North Africa. They consume a lot more common resources. They get a lot more social benefits. They have a low employment rate. Their salaries on average are very low. This equation doesn't hold that they would benefit. They are a big burden. So this was a comparison to the Danish study, and let's look at the Dutch study. So when we look at the net effect during the whole life cycle, so from the moment an immigrant moves in until he or she dies or moves permanently out from the country. The main results for asylum seekers from the Middle East is presented here. So immigration is expensive. This is how we could summarize it. So just one asylum seeker coming from the Middle East, whether it's to the Netherlands or to Finland, on average, the cost is almost 1 million euros. It's approximately minus 700,000 euros per one immigrant from these areas. Okay, if you look at, for example, Somalia, then it's even more. The rule of thumb for immigrants coming from Somalia is 1 million euros minus.
And then you didn't even count the leering centers that they start.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So these statistics doesn't even count in these leering centers. That's true. So all the data are what are available in these national databases. So basically the Dutch study uses data from Statistics Netherlands, and we've been using data from Statistics Finland. And what's remarkable here again is that we have conducted these studies totally independently. We published this in 2019, and Dutch academic folk published the results a couple of years ago, and we didn't know about each other. But the results, although we are speaking of two different countries and two different time frames, they are very similar. So this gives a lot of credibility to these results. So in the end, I will just show briefly these country-wise results from our study. So again, this summarizes that immigrants coming from the Middle East, they are the most expensive. And on the other side of the scale are other Western immigrants. So actually immigrants coming from Germany, they are actually net positive for the Finnish public finances. But for other immigrant groups, it's basically more or less negative. But the rule of thumb here is that the closer the immigrant comes from geographically, culturally, the better also the immigrant is for the taxpayer. And here is also by region of birth. So immigrants coming from the Middle East and North Africa, they are the most expensive. Actually, what was a bit surprising for me was that immigrants coming from Southeastern Asia are not that beneficial, but maybe this concerns only Finland, but actually many of these immigrants coming from that area are wives of Finnish men coming from Thailand, and they actually don't work that much, so that explains the results. They are basically housewives. But okay, this just summarizes it. Western immigrants, they are like the native population, basically, if you look at the effect on the taxpayer. If you look at the immigrants coming from the Middle East, our welfare systems cannot hold this kind of immigration. So, to summarize, only Western immigrants contribute at the level comparable to the native population during working age. And all the other immigrants, so immigrants coming from outside of Europe, present a net negative burden for the taxpayer. And the most expensive immigrants who also cause the most problems if you look at crime statistics and other like societal problems come from the same area. And if you want to remember one number, it's minus 700,000 per one immigrant from the Middle East. Like I said, we've come to this same conclusion from two other countries with two different data sets. One can do a similar kind of research in other European countries, but most likely, if it's done properly, the result will look pretty much the same. So as a conclusion, if immigration is to benefit the European taxpayer, as the propaganda says, it actually needs to be highly selective if we want to make it work in practice. This means admitting only immigrants with high wage incomes. And if we put such restrictions, this will also solve the big problem that Simo was speaking about, that our population is changing very rapidly. So if we have this kind of highly restrictive immigration policies, also the numbers will be much lower than they are today. So unfortunately, what comes, for example, to Finland, most of the immigrants coming from outside of Europe are not high salary immigrants, but actually they are totally opposite. They work much less than the native Finns, and even if they work, they have very low salaries and they bring their families in. So more than half of the newcomers to Finland are actually coming because of family reunification, and they are doing very badly. They basically come on average as unemployed to our countries, these persons who follow as families. So they impose a great fiscal burden on these host countries. So what's next for Suomen Perusta? Just briefly, we are going to publish studies on the effects of the Finnish taxpayer. So we are going to follow in the footsteps of this Dutch study to look at the numbers on the whole life cycles for other immigrant groups as well as the ones coming from the Middle East. But there are, of course, other interesting topics such as crime. So one of our key projects is to estimate how much does this criminality, especially what comes to violent crime, cost the Finnish taxpayer. And also because the population is changing so rapidly, and nobody in Finland wants to make conclusions. In other words, make population forecasts, look at the numbers and deduce what's going to happen in 50 years. That's one of our tasks to do as well. So if you are interested about our studies on immigration, which are quite unique in their scope, please visit our websites in English, which are presented here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samuli, and thank you, Simo, for this these presentations. A few short comments. I noticed that you quoted the CEO of the Helsinki Region Chamber of Commerce, Pia Pakkarinen, and she wanted more migration to Finland, and the same was done by the Enterprise Association in Sweden. They pushed for it. Until one of their member organizations, the Association of Swedish Retailers, raised the alarm bell because the thefts in the stores in Sweden were skyrocketing and costing them enormous amounts in insurance and protection and guards and so on and so forth. So big business is toning down their previous pro-migration push in Sweden due to the criminality that their previous policies paved the way for. Also, a thought experiment. You mentioned that over a lifespan, the average immigrant will cost 700,000 euros. Well, why not look at tax deductions for working families in our countries who actually get children? Because these figures, they really morally justify such a policy. So we should definitely think about this, not only in Hungary, but in Finland, Sweden, and the rest of Europe. So that's a challenge for us all, I would say. So there's time for questions and answers. I see many MEPs here. You're all most welcome today, and thank you all for coming. But also staff members are more than welcome to pose questions. Nora, Spain.
Pues muchísimas gracias por la presentación. Muchísimas gracias por su presentación, por estar aquí, por iluminarnos con datos, no con relatos. Y bueno, soy española y buscando cifras oficiales de mi país, pues resulta que no hay forma de encontrarlas y las que están falseadas, pero hasta tal punto que me he quedado loca. O sea, es imposible hacer un estudio oficial en España. Con CUCEFA sí que hemos conseguido hacer algunos estudios con el doctor Alejandro Macarrón, en el que sí que habla de cifras reales y de datos de lo que cuesta realmente un inmigrante a las arcas del Estado, un inmigrante, la migración irregular, ¿no? O sea, no reglada. Y también habla del crecimiento que es similar al de Finlandia o Dinamarca, el crecimiento versus los nacimientos de nacionales, ¿no? Estamos también en 200.000 nacimientos menos, pero un incremento en la inmigración de 700.000 migrantes, ¿no? Frente a 200.000 bajas. Los datos oficiales, por ejemplo, estamos hablando, claro, es imposible también tomar parte en el gobierno y explicar a nuestros gobernantes qué es lo que está sucediendo si ellos mismos se mienten. Pero según las cifras oficiales, dice que un migrante irregular gasta anualmente 2.000 euros a la seguridad social, coste de seguridad social, cosa que es absurdo cuando somos el país que más acoge, más inmigrantes acoge y somos la puerta de entrada. Imagínense ustedes cómo tenemos desaturados todos los servicios públicos. Y luego hay un tema muy importante, que es en el que tenemos que trabajar todos, que es en enseñar en las escuelas las costumbres europeas. No quiere decir que vayas a no enseñar sus propias costumbres, pero sí poner en valor las nuestras para que aprendan a vivir aprendan o que desde pequeñitos se les enseñe a vivir en comunidad y en la comunidad y en el país en el que están viviendo. Yo me he criado en España en un colegio alemán y yo aprendí las costumbres alemanas y aquí estoy. O sea, no ha pasado nada. Entonces, es muy importante que les doy de nuevo las gracias por todos los estudios. Perfecto. La pregunta es, ¿dónde podíamos recabar datos oficiales de lo que está sucediendo en España cuando nuestras propias autoridades nos están mintiendo? Gracias.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I believe in every country there is a statistical bureau that collects information about how much people pay taxes and how much they get subsidies, and you can count how much they use by budget, how much they use public services. So it is a question is that there should be somebody in Spain to study these things. In Finland, our small think tank, we are 2 guys working there, very small institution, and we have many universities in Finland and many research institutions and Finnish academy, but they haven't done a real study on the economical impact of immigration on Finnish taxpayer. And we just had to do it. In Spain, maybe your party can finance some organization to do this kind of study, and you can look. We can help, and you can look the Dutch and the Danish studies and take them as an example. But sometimes it has to be some kind of small organization that does a big work.
Mr. Valchev, Bulgaria.
First, thank you for the organization of this event. Thank you for the presentation. So good, so many data. So I envy you because you have this data officially. In my country too, it's very hard to obtain this quantity and this quality of data. I have one very simple question. How did the official authorities in your country react to this kind of data and to this presentation if you have already presented this study in your country? How did they react? What comments did they do? Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Basically, they were silent. They don't want to talk about it because they can't fight against the data and the numbers. So like 10 years ago when we published our big study, there was some mention in the news about it. But after that, it was the big media doesn't even mention about our studies. And it's very frustrating because we have 10 years known these facts, and we once in a while we publish new research on different aspects of this matter, and it's all very clear that migrants they pay less taxes than they use subsidies, and it's so clear every number say, but even though they just don't want to talk about this. They repeat and repeat that Finland needs migration because migrants pay taxes and we need more money because the population is aging. So it's like totalitarian propaganda. They are just repeating and repeating it all over again. And if we want to have some kind of a discussion event, it's very hard to. We haven't even tried to done that in years, because if I call members of parliament in other parties that do you want to come and we have a debate, somebody has his data and do you want to come to debate? Everybody is busy. No one has time to go, because in their hearts they know that they are lying. But the best solution what they have made is that they just don't want to confront these numbers.
Okay, one small addition. So when I published the numbers on the life cycle effects, so that one immigrant is minus 700,000 to minus 1 million euros if we speak of Somalis. The Finnish public broadcasting company, so the Finnish BBC, they had just one critique towards it. They said that it doesn't take into account the utility from helping migrants. So it was totally laughable. That was the only thing that they said, that we are somehow morally benefiting so much from taking in these migrants, that we should even pay this amount, even if we would ruin our welfare system.
Mr. Jongen from Germany.
Yes, thank you. Maybe a follow-up question to this one. Thank you very much for your presentation. This is very, very important data. And we have been knowing this for years, that this propaganda from mainstream governments that migrants are going to pay for us and for our rents and so on, and pensions, it's all a scam, and it doesn't align with the real data. So I remember that in Germany, we had a study by a quite well-known and established economist, Professor Raffelhüschen. Maybe you know that study.
I know the study very, very well.
Yes. Okay, yes. It was soon after Merkel opened the borders. He stated that this crazy immigration policy will cost the German state. The number was easy to remember, 1 trillion.
6 trillion.
6 trillion even.
Yes.
6 trillion. well, it's even more, but there was also the number of 1 trillion within some years and 6 trillion maybe in the long future.
Yeah, that's the newest number from him for the current immigration.
Okay.
In Germany.
Okay, so he corrected it. Yeah. Well, but we experienced also in Germany that this was it was published, but then it was largely ignored by the official politics, and they continue with their narrative nevertheless, which is obviously false. So the numbers are there. We could, and everyone could see them and could check them, but they ignore them. So that's clear for the politics. My question is, what about the academia? Is it also that corrupt as the governments? Or what do you experience with let's say in Finland, with the academia? Are the universities, are you in contact with some universities? Are you heard there, or are you completely cancelled also in this field? Is it, in your experience, corrupt in the same way, or is there some free thinking still going on there and sticking to the truth? So what is the situation?
Well, I think in Finland, in academical studies, they are putting very much money in academical studies in Finland, but there is no statistical studies on migration and its impacts, and that's really ridiculous because it's one of the biggest issue. And I would say people in the universities see that it's not maybe politically correct subject to study. It's not the way to have a friends in universities and have a new professorships or have a new money for your projects. So I think the universities, I think probably are very political correct in this sense. And well, the chairman of the board of our think tank Suomen Perusta is actually Professor Emeritus Matti Virén from Turku University. He's an emeritus professor from economics. So there are some good economists, but of course he's retired from the university. But well, that's big problem that if it would be a normal world, the universities would have done these studies 20 years ago. But there probably is some political reasons that economists in university think that they rather study some other subject and don't want to get in trouble.
In short, I think that they are fearing for their funding. There was one researcher many years ago writing in a newspaper where he openly admitted that he doesn't want to study immigration crime because it would cut his funding. Nobody would fund him in the future.
I believe it's called omerta. On that line, prossima domanda dell'onorevole Ciccioli.
Sì, Ciccioli, è un nome difficile. Allora, io vorrei soprattutto approfondire il problema dei servizi sociosanitari. Io ho diretto per gli ultimi 8 anni, prima di rientrare nell'attività politica, e nel mio dipartimento, insomma nella mia provincia, l'area dei servizi psichiatrici e delle tossicodipendenze, e quindi avevo tutto un certo numero di persone di cui poi osservavo i comportamenti sociali. E la mia città è una città capoluogo di regione, 100.000 abitanti, tutta la provincia altri 400.000, circa 500.000 in tutto. La prima cosa era sull'assegnazione delle case. I criteri di assegnazione delle case popolari sono in base al numero dei componenti del nucleo familiare. Praticamente non solo nel capoluogo, ma quasi tutti gli altri centri, l'80% delle abitazioni popolari veniva assegnata a persone di origine straniera, perché il numero dei figli, il numero dei componenti del nucleo familiare era molto forte, molto numeroso, e quindi tutti i locali finivano verso la fine della graduatoria delle assegnazioni. Quindi sugli stanziamenti dell'edilizia popolare circa l'80% finiva al 13% della popolazione. La popolazione straniera nella mia città in particolare si aggira sul 12-13%, quel 12-13% prendeva l'80% delle abitazioni che ovviamente erano costruite con i fondi pubblici tra l'altro versati da lavoratori. Poi l'altro aspetto è le prestazioni sanitarie. Nel pronto soccorso, quindi gli accertamenti sanitari non si pagano, sono gratuiti, non hanno un ticket, cioè. Per cui nel pronto soccorso si regolano molte persone che devono fare semplici accertamenti che si potrebbero fare non in pronto soccorso d'urgenza, ma fare regolarmente attraverso le liste di prenotazione, attraverso i medici di famiglia, i medici di base. Nel pronto soccorso circa il 40% delle prestazioni, 35-40%, cioè più di un terzo, sono di persone straniere che non hanno urgenza, però si recano là perché hanno queste prestazioni, ovviamente quando si presenta lì manifestano un problema sanitario, vengono fatti tutti gli accertamenti globali e quindi questo porta a intasare il pronto soccorso, 1. 2, che utilizzano un sacco di risorse che ovviamente dovrebbero passare per altre linee. La stessa cosa avviene nelle liste d'attesa, c'è una richiesta di prestazione sanitaria di gran lunga superiore ai cittadini residenti, perché sono prestazioni che avvengono con basso, anche quelle esterne, con un ticket che è molto modesto. Dico di più, molto spesso i cittadini stranieri fanno venire temporaneamente dei loro familiari perché essendo familiari, pur non essendoci ricongiungimento, però anche se temporaneamente sono ospiti, hanno diritto a una serie di prestazioni. Se passano come prestazioni urgenti rientrano nelle prestazioni elargite. E gli ultimi 2 punti invece sono sugli assegni di disoccupazione. La disoccupazione viene data dopo che uno ha lavorato almeno un certo numero di mesi minimi, mi sembra 6 mesi sono il numero minimo per accedere alla disoccupazione. Lavorando temporaneamente usufruiscono degli assegni di disoccupazione che sono circa l'80% dello stipendio, del salario che percepivano, poi hanno per un certo tempo, fino a un massimo di 18 mesi, un salario decrescente. In quel periodo in genere le stesse persone svolgono un lavoro nero, un lavoro non ufficiale, che quindi hanno dei guadagni e nello stesso tempo percepiscono la disoccupazione, ovviamente sottraendo la disoccupazione ad altre persone, dipende come funziona il meccanismo e qual è la categoria, perché ogni categoria economica. Ultimo punto, nelle situazioni di indigenza, anche qui nelle situazioni di indigenza, oltre il 50% delle situazioni di indigenza sono per stranieri e qui riguardano sono già piccoli contributi, sono contributi, non possono superare entro l'anno nella mia città oltre 1.000 euro, quindi sono piccole cose, 200 euro, 300 euro e via di seguito, fino a 1.000.000 nei 12 mesi fino a 2.000 euro, però anche qui c'è un budget comunale e il budget si esaurisce perché ci sono molte contribuzioni. In genere quando i primi mesi dell'anno sono interamente coperti, gli ultimi mesi dell'anno purtroppo non c'è più, non c'è più disponibilità da parte delle risorse pubbliche, si esauriscono e quindi nessuno li prende più, né i cittadini residenti da molti anni né nuovi cittadini o stranieri. Tutto questo è una sottrazione indiretta, non di tasse direttamente, ma una sottrazione indiretta nel welfare. Però c'è tutto il discorso del politicamente corretto, che comunque se c'è un'emergenza, un'urgenza, tutti devono avere la stessa copertura, diciamo, sociosanitaria. L'unica sfida è la sfida demografica. Se noi non incentiviamo le giovani coppie, questa situazione diventa sempre più sfavorevole. O le giovani coppie fanno i figli, o noi siamo sempre più sfavoriti, perché non c'è, si arriverà quasi a un break-even, cioè che il numero dei figli degli stranieri è quasi simile a quello dei cittadini autoctoni, e noi abbiamo qualche zona, per la verità non come per dire la periferia di Bruxelles, però dove non ci sono quasi più cittadini italiani nelle scuole, giovani iscritti nelle scuole, perché i genitori li iscrivono in quartieri limitrofi, quartieri vicini, perché le classi su 25 ragazzini ce ne sono 5-6 italiani, la zona portuale per dire un'altra zona, e allora finiscono di essere marginati e quindi spostano l'iscrizione in altre zone e si creano proprio delle classi interamente di stranieri, di bambini stranieri.
Very much good information for many topics, and it sounds very familiar. Like you talk about social housing in our data, like I showed you the neighborhood numbers database, where there is the Helsinki region, and you can look at neighborhood by neighborhood statistic that shows that the migrants are 2 times more often in social housing than the native population. And there are in the Helsinki area 16 neighborhoods where among people in social housing, the immigrants are majority of people in social housing, 16 areas. And you talk about healthcare. There is, of course, a lot of problems. First of all, you understand that if migrants, they are more unemployed, and when they are employed, they are in low salary work, so they pay not so much taxes than the local population, but they use health services as much or even more than local people. So there is one problem. You mentioned that the immigrants can overuse the healthcare. That's of course problem if they use it in that kind of things where they don't really need it. And of course, when we talk about immigrants and healthcare, of course, that also costs that it takes doctor a longer time to treat immigrant if the immigrant doesn't speak the local language, for example. And that costs too. There is many reasons why the healthcare is problems with the immigration. And you talk about the black economy, meaning that the migrants don't always pay taxes. And there has been also Finland studies that, and the police had made information about that migrant restaurants, for example, they very often use black economy, so they don't always pay taxes for workers who are migrants. And in that area, there was a couple of months ago a very good book in Finland called, in mainstream publication, it was called Long Shift, How Modern Slavery came to Finland. And it's a report on that. Finland is full of ethnic restaurants like Nepalese and Indian, where the people who work there come from Nepal and India, and there is a lot of you may call it slavery, because people who come from Nepal to Nepalese restaurants, they pay like 10 or 20,000 euros to the owner of the restaurant. So the owner invites them to come to work there, and they work there almost without salary for years, 6 days a week in long shifts, because they are ready to be like slaves, because in the end, after maybe 4 or 5 years, they get permanent residence and so on, and they can stay in Finland and have every services that other Finns also have. So there is a modern slavery among especially like ethnic restaurants. They bring people to Europe because people in the poor countries are ready to do whatever it takes that they can move here, where the standard of living is very good. And you also mentioned the school shopping. Actually, in Finland, even the mainstream media is now writing about it. That in the Helsinki area, it's very common that people, when it comes time to put children to preschool or school or daycare, they start to think which is the right area to live. What is the school you can put your children where it's safe? Because, like I mentioned, it's already around 25% of the people in Helsinki region are foreign background, and people can officially say that they are tolerant and they want more migration, and it's nice to have migrants. But when they have to put their children in school, the reality bites then.
So I would just like to add to Simo's comments. So it's not just about the asylum seekers or about the so-called irregular migration. Actually, most of the migrants who are not doing very well, they are faring very badly if you look at the employment and the social benefits received. They actually come as workers in low skill, low wage jobs. So like Simo said, they might come into a restaurant first and then they hold on for the first 4 years. And when they get a permanent residence permit, they can stop basically working and they bring their families with them. So this is a very big phenomenon in Finland and probably in many other European countries. So even this labor-based immigration, most of it is actually this kind of low-skilled, low-wage immigration, bringing their families with them. So more than half of the new immigrants come to Finland as family members. And this social housing, yeah, it's a very big problem. Like Simo said, in some areas in Helsinki, our capital, 70 or 80% of the inhabitants are migrants. And it's one of the key factors that's driving this segregation, that there are like areas where like 70 or 80% of the young people are already immigrants. Of course, the main reason is the national immigration policy, but this is also one driving factor. And when there are so many immigrants among the kids, it's like even the mainstream media, like Simo said, already writes about this issue that families with small children belonging to the native population, they are moving away from these areas because they want to have their kids very understandably in schools where the other students speak Finnish. Yeah, and I presented maybe some abstract numbers about the net fiscal effects on the taxpayer, but the components, the actual components behind these numbers are exactly those that you listed. So these immigrants in general, they have very low employment. If they are employed, their salaries are so low that hardly anything is paid from them as taxes. And on the other hand, they are very much overrepresented as recipients of social benefits. So those are the actual factors behind these numbers. So thank you for your comment.
Thank you. And the last question goes to Mr. Grims from Slovenia.
Thank you very much, but I just want to help a little because costs of this mass immigration is so high that because of the political correctness, probably most politicians and probably almost none of university professors want to really speak about them. Why professors? Because they need money, and if they show in the public true numbers, they probably won't get money anymore. That's how it works in Europe, unfortunately. No? And what is the real cost of that? Today we're mixing the legal migration and illegal migration, but all mass migration is destroying Europe. And how expensive this is, and how much money we are throwing through the window and destroying Europe with it. Show this little mathematics I will show you, present you now. Because it's almost impossible to get official numbers.
how, for example, are all costs together for one person for 1 month that comes, for example, like a refugee in a country. No? And in Slovenia, we have this luck that we have an additional court and we have official number. That means that each person that comes to Slovenia as a lying refugee or whatever you call it, as a matter of fact, it's illegal migrant, costs 1,963 euros. That's official number. Now, this number is, to be honest, 7 years old. If we include the inflation in this time, it goes over 2,000 euros a month for each person. Now, let's do the mathematics. 12 months, a year, that gives us about 25,000 euros each person, each. And then let's go to 40 years, normal lifetime working time for a normal person. That's 1 million euros each. And now we can present this number to a normal person, to a normal citizen, a working man who works hard to serve his family somewhere in Europe, born in Europe, citizen all the time, and paying taxes. Where are his taxes going? You know? Each boat that comes, for example, to Italy or to Spain, or each group of perhaps 30 people that comes through Balkan route in the European Union, that means, oh, look, here goes 30 million euros of our taxpayers' money in the next years. Each boat, each group. Now, include the numbers that we are available, for this situation. And you will see how many billions and billions of money are we throwing through the window. Instead of putting them in demography, in the good family politics to support them, to support real nations of Europe. And you will see that we could call this, as a matter of fact, treason of European nations. Now, let me repeat this again, that we'll remember it. Each person that comes illegally in Europe and stays here, and there are millions and millions of them. Official number is for, I think, for Germany about 1 million, for France about 750,000, and so on and so on. These are people that are here as false asylum seekers. They should be already officially put back, and they stay somewhere in Europe. And those are costs which costs about security, about healthcare, about everything that we have to support in the end. And we have to pay them for that as taxpayers. 1 million for each such person. Now tell this to your citizens and you will see the reaction. If they agree with that they work all their lives and don't get 1 million euros, and they have to pay for anybody who comes here and say, oh, I want asylum, and so I don't know what, and stays here. And we are paying for this and paying and paying and paying. And that costs in 40 years, 1 million for each person. Thank you very much.
We have also made meme pictures for internet that we try to show that one migrant from Middle East cost 700,000 or 1 million euros through his lifestyle or her whole lifespan. And we have in meme pictures showed that what you could do also with that money, how many people you could help in the refugee camps, or how many police officers you could hire, or how many nurses you could hire in hospital. You could hire in hospitals. So it's good to show that what are the alternative how could you use better those money that you put on humanitarian immigration? And maybe you said this is the last question, so I may make some remarks maybe.
Yeah, we have interpreters for 2 more minutes.
Okay, well, just two small points. Like Samuli said, refugee immigration is the biggest problem, but it is not the only problem, because the big picture is that people from poor countries want to move to Europe, and they use whatever routes they can. They go as refugees, low-skill immigration, family reunification, or students. That's a new thing that schools and universities are making more and more English-speaking lines, because they know that there is in poor countries millions of people who want to come to Europe, and they have know that they get more money, more people they take in, and we have the problems. And one point more, when people say that the immigration is good for us, follow the money. They are usually representing like a big corporation that can get cheap labor and or can get new consumers, and that's maybe good for them, but it's not good for taxpayers. So be smart and think: is this man or woman who is promoting immigration, is he thinking about the taxpayers or some other group?
Thank you both for a most enlightening presentation, and I think it's remarkable how the findings from your research align with similar studies, as you mentioned, the one from the Netherlands by Jan van de Beek, and also the one from the Danish government. Now let's cut to the chase. The mantra from the European Commission for many, many years has been Europe needs migration. The claim that mass migration from vastly different cultures is somehow a financial win for our nations, well, that's simply untrue. And the research, like your Finnish study, proves what we've known all along. For welfare systems based on a Western European model, mass migration isn't just a financial burden. It's an incredibly expensive one. The costs far outweigh any potential benefits, and even migration that is work-related, as you mentioned, doesn't yield a profit for state finances. Take, well, if we go across the pond to Minnesota, for example, we've seen rampant abuse and fraud in these communities, and the situation is not much different in my country, Sweden, where this issue was exposed, though, as usual, mainstream media barely touched it. So, dear friends, make no mistake, the welfare state cannot survive under the strain of this massive misuse. It's time we face the reality that many migrants see our nations as nothing more than ATMs, and this needs to stop. We must reject the idea that Western nations should be the final destination for individuals seeking to maximize their use of our welfare systems while still sending money back to their countries of origin. So please spread this message. Share this important research. It's available on the homepage of Suomen Perusta in English, as you mentioned. Help set the record straight for those who still believe the dangerous myth that mass migration is the financial savior of Europe.